The wind in the Appalachian mountains carried a strange, restless hum that night, the kind of sound that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand straight. I was alone, far deeper into the range than I had ever gone before, hiking a trail that barely existed anymore. The last signpost I'd seen was rotting in the dirt. Its words faded into ghostly scratches. My boots crunched on damp leaves, the air heavy with the smell of moss and old rain. It had seemed like a good idea earlier that morning to escape the noise of the city, breathe in the untouched wilderness, maybe even camp under a sky spilling with stars. I had my pack, my flashlight, and enough food to last 3 days. But by late afternoon, the forest had swallowed the light, and the silence started to feel wrong. Not peaceful wrong. The trees here grew thick, gnarled, and impossibly tall, their roots pushing up through the soil like ancient bones. I stopped for a moment, scanning the woods. No wind stirred the branches. Even the insects were quiet. Then, far behind me, a crunch. I turned sharply, my flashlight beam slicing through the dim green shadows. Nothing, just the same narrow trail, winding between the trees. My heartbeat kicked up, but I told myself it was just an animal, a deer, maybe a raccoon. Still, I started walking faster. The trail dipped into a shallow ravine, and the air grew colder. I could see my breath now, small clouds in the fading light. That was odd. The temperature had dropped at least 15 degrees in minutes. My boots sank into soft mud, and each step seemed louder than it should have been, echoing faintly as if I were in some enormous hidden room. Then I saw it. Up ahead, a cabin. It looked abandoned, its wood blackened by years of rain, the roof sagging in the middle. No windows, just empty frames like staring eyes. The door hung slightly open, swaying on rusted hinges. I stopped dead in the trail, every instinct screaming that I shouldn't go closer. But curiosity, or maybe something else, pushed me forward. When I stepped onto the porch, the boards groaned under my weight. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the smell of damp rot. My flashlight beam swept across a bare room. A broken chair, a pile of crumbled stone in the corner, and carved into the far wall, deep scratches. Not random. Words. They read, "Don't stay after dark." I froze. My watch read 7:42 p.m. The sun had already dropped below the ridge. The last light outside was fading fast. From somewhere in the trees behind the cabin, I heard it again, crunch slow, deliberate footsteps, this time closer. I didn't move. My fingers tightened around the flashlight until my knuckles ached, the beam trembling just slightly as I aimed it toward the doorway. The sound stopped. The forest outside was still black and silent, but I could feel that someone was out there, watching. I took a careful step back into the corner of the cabin, pressing my back against the cold, damp wall. The scratches seemed deeper now, almost as if they had been carved with something jagged and desperate. My mind raced through possibilities, some twisted prank, a hunter, a drifter, but none of them explained why the air felt heavier, like the room itself was holding its breath. Then, from just beyond the open doorway, came a whisper. It wasn't words at first, more like the sound of air escaping through clenched teeth. But it grew sharper, clearer, and though it was quiet, it felt as though it were being spoken directly into my ear. "You shouldn't be here." I spun toward the door, flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. Empty, my pulse thundered in my ears, and every nerve screamed for me to run. But the moment I stepped toward the porch, something shifted in the shadows, a figure, pale and still, standing between the trees. It wasn't moving. It wasn't even breathing. Just watching. I stumbled backward into the cabin, my boot catching on the broken chair. The crash echoed through the woods like a gunshot. The figure tilted its head, just slightly, the way a predator studies something it's already decided to kill. Then it began to walk toward me. Slow, deliberate. I slammed the cabin door, heart hammering, and shoved the chair against it, though it groaned under a sudden, heavy push from the other side. And then nothing. The pressure stopped. The footsteps faded. But I knew it hadn't gone. I stood frozen, straining to hear anything beyond the pounding of my own heartbeat. The silence pressed in until it felt physical, like the air itself was weighing me down. My flashlight flickered, the beam dimming for just a second before steadying again. I didn't trust the darkness here. I forced myself to breathe, slow and quiet. Maybe it was gone. Maybe I'd scared it off. But deep down, I knew that whatever was out there didn't scare easily. My eyes scanned the room again, searching for another way out. That's when I noticed that at the back of the cabin, half hidden behind a pile of crumbled stone, there was a trapdoor. The wood was warped and stained dark in places, as if it had been damp for years. A heavy iron latch kept it shut. Every part of me told me not to open it, but if that thing came back, the front door wouldn't hold for long. I crouched, fingers trembling as I unlatched the rusted metal. It gave with a harsh screech that seemed far too loud in the stillness. A wave of cold, stale air rolled up from the black space beneath. It smelled of earth, mildew, and something else. Something metallic. My flashlight beam cut into the darkness, revealing narrow wooden steps descending into what looked like a root cellar. The walls were lined with shelves, and on them jars. Dozens of them. I climbed down slowly, my boots creaking on the old wood. At the bottom, I moved closer to the shelves. The jars weren't filled with fruit or vegetables. Inside were dark, murky liquids. And floating in some of them were things. Fingers, eyes, small bones. My stomach twisted violently, bile rising in my throat. I staggered back, the beam swinging wildly. On the far wall, half hidden in shadow, hung something I first thought was a bundle of cloth. But then it moved, and it whispered my name. The sound of my name in that damp, airless cellar froze me in place. It was soft, almost tender, but there was something in the way it rolled off the voice. Something wrong. My flashlight trembled as I lifted it toward the bundle in the corner. It wasn't cloth. It was a figure, human-shaped, but impossibly thin, its skin stretched tight and pale as parchment over sharp bones. Its eyes glistened in the beam, black and wet, and its mouth hung open in a half-smile that showed teeth far too long and narrow. "I've been waiting," it rasped. The voice wasn't quite right. It carried an echo, like it came from a hollow space, inside its chest rather than its throat. Every muscle in my body screamed to run, but my legs felt locked, my hands stiff and numb. It shifted forward, one spidery hand gripping the wall as it pulled itself out of the shadow. The bones in its arm cracked softly with the movement. It was taller than I thought. Its head nearly brushed the low ceiling. "You came down here," it said, tilting its head as if in curiosity. "They all come down here." I stumbled back toward the stairs, my heel hitting the first step. The flashlight beam jerked across the cellar and landed on something I hadn't noticed before, a series of deep scratches in the dirt floor. They weren't random marks. They were drag lines, long ones. The thing's eyes followed my gaze, and its grin widened. "You won't get far." It moved, then not a slow, creeping advance, but a sudden lunge that sent the shelves rattling. I scrambled up the steps, the wood groaning under my weight, my pack snagging on a protruding nail. I ripped free, slamming the trapdoor shut, just as something heavy struck it from below. The whole cabin shuddered. Then silence again, but I could hear it breathing. The breathing was slow, deep, and deliberate, like it was savoring each inhale, drawing the air in through something wet. My hands pressed down hard on the trapdoor, even though I knew the flimsy wood wouldn't hold for long if it truly wanted to come through. Then the sound stopped. I waited, holding my breath, listening for the faintest movement. Nothing. The stillness was worse than the noise. It meant I didn't know where it was. My eyes darted to the door of the cabin. The broken chair I'd shoved against it was still in place. I thought about making a run for it, but the forest outside felt no safer. That pale figure could be anywhere out there, just beyond the reach of my flashlight. I needed a plan. I backed toward the far corner of the room, flashlight beam catching on something near the wall. A narrow window, half covered with warped boards. If I could pry them loose, I might slip out and get to the trail. Without using the front door, I set my pack down quietly and wedged the flashlight under my arm, so I could use both hands. The nails squealed as I worked them free, each sound cutting through the silence like a warning. Halfway through the last board, the cabin's front door creaked. My head snapped toward it. The chair was moving slowly, almost carefully being nudged aside from the other side. No pounding, No force, just a steady push, as though whatever was outside knew there was no rush. I yanked the final board free from the window and shoved my pack through the narrow gap. The cold air from outside brushed against my face. I was halfway through when I heard again my name. But this time, it came from inside the cabin, behind me. I didn't turn around. Every instinct screamed that if I looked, I wouldn't make it out at all. My fingers scraped the window frame as I shoved the rest of my body through, boots hitting the damp ground outside. I grabbed my pack and started running, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly across the trees. The forest was black, the kind of darkness where even the moonlight seemed swallowed. Every breath burned in my lungs, the cold air sharp and metallic. My boots pounded over roots and wet leaves, and somewhere behind me, I heard it following. It wasn't crashing through the woods like a person would. There was no rustle of leaves, no snapping of branches, just that same steady, measured pace. Like it knew no matter how fast I ran, it could keep up. The trail, if it even was the trail, sloped upward toward the ridge. My legs screamed. My chest felt ready to split open. But I pushed harder, scanning ahead for any sign of the old markers. I couldn't see them. A branch snapped to my left. I jerked the flashlight toward the sound and caught a glimpse of something pale slipping between the trees. Too tall and too thin to be human. I stumbled, went down hard on one knee, and pain shot up my leg. The flashlight tumbled from my grip, rolling into the ferns. The beam spun, flashing over the trunks, until it froze on something ahead. There was another cabin. This one was smaller, more intact, its roof still holding. Light dim yellow, flickering glowed faintly from inside. My mind raced. Someone else? Out here? Behind me? The sound came again. My name. Closer now. I limped toward the cabin, every step feeling slower than the last, until I reached the door and slammed my fist against it. It opened before I could knock again. An old woman stood there, her face half in shadow, eyes unreadable. "You shouldn't have come this way," she said softly. "It's already seen you." Her words sank into me like ice water, stealing the breath from my lungs. I glanced over my shoulder, but the darkness beyond the tree line was unbroken. No movement, no shape, yet I could feel it there. The woman stepped aside without another word, motioning me inside. I didn't hesitate. The warmth hit me. First a small fire crackled in the stone hearth, the air heavy with the smell of burning pine. The single room was cramped but tidy, shelves lined with jars, bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters, and a thick wool blanket draped over a wooden rocking chair. She shut the door with a firm click and slid a heavy iron bolt across it. Then she turned to me. "It won't cross this threshold." "Not while I'm here," she said, her voice calm, almost casual. I swallowed hard, still catching my breath. What is it?" She gave me a long look before answering. "Some call it a watcher. Some say it's older than these mountains themselves. It finds people who wander too far, and once it's seen you, it follows." I wanted to believe she was speaking in riddles, but the pounding in my chest told me otherwise. "Why me?" "Not just you," she said, moving to the window and pulling a thick curtain closed. "It's always hungry." The fire popped loudly, making me flinch. I realized I was still gripping my pack like a lifeline. My hands were stiff from the cold, my knuckles aching. She noticed and nodded toward the chair. "Sit. Warm yourself. It can't hurt you in here." Reluctantly, I sat, the blanket warm against my shoulders. For the first time since I'd seen that first cabin, I let myself breathe. But then I saw it the way her eyes flicked toward the door, not with confidence, but with worry. And faintly, beneath the crackle of the fire, I heard it again, my name. This time, it was whispering from inside the walls. The whispering crept along the wooden beams, weaving through cracks and knots in the walls like a cold breath sliding across skin. I shivered, the warmth of fire doing little to chase away the chill settling deep in my bones. The woman's face tightened. She moved to the hearth and tossed a small bundle of herbs into the flames. The smoke rose in thick curls, carrying with it a pungent, almost medicinal scent. "It knows how to get inside," she said quietly, "but it fears fire in the old ways. This is why I stay here, why I fight." Her eyes met mine, steady and tired. You can't run from it. It's bound to this place, to the mountains, and now it's bound to you. My mind spun. What kind of thing was this? What was it really after? I'll help you, she said, as if reading my thoughts. But first, you need to understand what it is, and what it wants. She gestured toward a battered wooden chest against the far wall. Inside were papers, old maps, faded photographs, and journals written in a spidery hand. I took a deep breath and opened the first journal, its pages brittle and stained with time. The story it told was darker than anything I could have imagined, a tale of a mountain spirit twisted by centuries of loneliness and hunger, feeding not on flesh, but on fear itself. As I read, the whispering grew louder, more urgent, as if the thing outside knew I was learning its secrets. I glanced up at the woman. What do I do now? She folded her hands in her lap. We wait until night falls. Then we face it. Together. The sun dipped behind the jagged peaks, bleeding reds and purples into the darkening sky. Shadows stretched long, swallowing the small cabin in near-complete darkness. Outside, the forest seemed to hold its breath, the usual chorus of nighttime creatures eerily absent. I sat beside the woman, the weight of the journal heavy in my hands. Every word etched itself into my mental warnings, the rituals, the history of a presence older than the oldest tree in the forest. She moved with quiet purpose, pulling from her pack a small iron knife, a bundle of sage, and a length of worn rope twisted with strips of cloth. These are the tools, she explained. Old magic, passed down from those who came before us. It won't save you, but it might give us a chance. My heart pounded in my chest. Fear, exhaustion, and a strange sense of resolve warred inside me. I was a city kid, unprepared for this ancient, lurking evil. Yet here I was, deep in the Appalachian Mountains, about to face a nightmare born from the woods themselves. As night fell, the woman moved to the door, casting a circle of salt and sage around the cabin's perimeter. The air thickened with the scent of burning herbs, and the shadows outside seemed to pulse and shift in response. Then, the whispering started again, closer, sharper, like a knife scraping stone. We stood side by side, weapons ready. The door shuddered, the wood groaning under an unseen force trying to push inside. And then, from the darkness, the figure emerged, pale, thin, its eyes gleaming with hunger. But this time, it hesitated at the threshold, the circle of salt glowing faintly under its feet. It hissed, a sound like broken glass, then recoiled. We held our ground as it vanished into the night, the forest swallowing its retreat. The woman exhaled, a long, tired breath. It's not gone. It never truly leaves. I nodded, knowing that this night in the Appalachian Mountains would haunt me forever. But somehow I had survived. For now, the silence after it vanished was thick, almost suffocating. I sank to the floor, the adrenaline finally draining from my limbs, leaving behind a deep exhaustion that felt like it seeped into my very bones. The woman sat beside me, her hands resting calmly on her knees, eyes still scanning the dark windows, as if expecting the shadow to reappear at any moment. Will it come back? I whispered, my voice barely audible over crackling fire. She nodded slowly. Every night it prowls, waiting for a chance. It feeds on fear, on doubt. But the circle keeps it at bay for now. I rubbed my arms, trying to shake the chill that lingered despite the fire's warmth. How long have you been fighting it? Longer than I can remember, she said, voice soft but firm. My family has kept this place safe for generations. The mountains hold secrets, dark ones, some better left alone. Her gaze met mine again, steady and unwavering. You're lucky to be alive. Most who see it don't come back at all. The weight of her words settled over me like a stone. I had come seeking adventure, escape, maybe a story to tell. Instead, I'd found something ancient and hungry, something that lived just beyond the edges of light and reason. But I was still here, and somehow I knew the mountains weren't finished with me yet. Days passed in a blur of uneasy quiet. I stayed in the cabin, sharing stories in silence with the woman, whose name I learned was Miriam, She moved through the space with the ease of someone who belonged to these woods. Her knowledge of herbs, signs, and old rituals was deep, a lifeline tethered to the past. Each night, the whispers returned, sometimes faint, like a breeze through dead leaves, sometimes sharp and cruel, like a voice inside my own head. I learned to recognize the patterns the way the presence tested the circle, seeking cracks or openings. I slept fitfully, never fully letting my guard down. One evening, Miriam showed me a worn leather book, its pages filled with hand-drawn symbols and ink-smudged notes. "This," she said, "is the key to banishing it, but it's dangerous. The ritual must be done in the heart of the forest, where the spirit was first bound." Fear clenched at my chest, but curiosity and something like determination pushed me forward. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow night," Miriam replied. "You'll need to trust me and trust the old ways, because once we begin, there's no turning back." The mountains loomed outside, silent watchers beneath the stars, and I knew that whatever waited in their shadows was watching, too patient, hungry, and waiting for the moment to strike. The next day passed slowly, the sunlight feeling thin and fragile against the looming weight of what was to come. Miriam prepared a small pack of items, herbs, chalk, and a jagged iron blade worn smooth by years of use. She taught me how to draw the protective symbols, how to steady my breath, and focus my mind when the whispers grew loudest. As dusk settled over the Appalachian foothills, we set out into the forest. The trees grew taller here, their branches knitting overhead into a dense canopy that swallowed the remaining light. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, but beneath it lingered the unmistakable undercurrent of something old and sorrowful. We moved silently, the only sounds our footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves. Miriam led the way, her eyes sharp and searching for signs, broken branches, disturbed earth, strange markings carved into bark. Finally, we reached a small clearing, ringed by ancient stones moss-covered and worn smooth by time. In the center lay a shallow pit, dark and empty, like a forgotten wound in the earth. "This is where it began," Miriam said softly, "where the spirit was bound long ago to keep it from spreading." I swallowed hard and nodded, feeling the weight of history settle on my shoulders. Miriam began to draw the protective symbols in the dirt, her hand steady despite the growing chill in the air. I followed, copying her movements as best I could, tracing the same patterns around the clearing's edge. Then the wind shifted. A low, guttural growl rumbled through the trees. The shadows deepened, thickening into shapes that twisted and stretched toward us. The spirit had come. There was no turning back now. The air grew heavy, charged with a suffocating energy that seemed to twist the very fabric of the forest around us. The shadows coalesced, dark tendrils weaving and pulsing like living smoke. The whispering returned this time not distant, but roaring inside my mind, clawing at my thoughts with sharp, icy fingers. Miriam's voice cut through the chaos, calm but firm. "Focus. The ritual binds it. Your fear gives it power. Do not let it in." I clenched my fists, tracing the last symbols with trembling fingers. The iron blade glinted faintly in the dying light, its edge catching the wind as Miriam raised it high. She began to chant in a language older than the mountains themselves, her words vibrating in the charged air. The spirit screamed a sound unlike anything I'd ever heard, an unearthly wail that shook the trees and sent birds scattering into the night sky. The ground beneath us trembled, the pit glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. I felt it reach for me, cold fingers brushing my skin, threatening to drag me into the darkness. But Miriam's chant grew louder, the circle of symbols glowing brighter, pushing back the shadows. With a final, shuddering cry, the spirit was pulled into the pit, the ground sealing with a thunderous crack. The forest fell silent. Exhausted, I sank to my knees, the weight of what had just happened crashing down on me. Miriam looked at me, eyes filled with both relief and warning. "It is bound for now, but the mountains never forget." As the first stars emerged overhead, I realized that the Appalachian Mountains held stories far darker and deeper than I could have ever imagined, and that I was now a part of them forever. Weeks later, back in the city, the noise and lights felt foreign, almost overwhelming. I kept replaying everything: the cabin, the whispering, the figure, and the ritual in the clearing. Sleep was scarce, haunted by shadowed eyes and that low, echoing scream. I tried to tell myself it was over, that the spirit was locked away and I was safe. But sometimes, when the wind howled through the city streets late at night, I could swear I heard my name whispered on it. Miriam had given me a small talisman before I left, a carved piece of wood, darkened with age and wrapped in faded cloth. "Keep this," she said. "It's a reminder. The mountains don't forget those they take." I still carry it with me, a quiet warning against forgetting, because deep down I know the Appalachian Mountains are waiting, watching, and one day, maybe, they'll call me back. Until then, I live with the knowledge that some stories aren't just stories. Some fears are real, and some shadows never truly fade. Months passed, but the talisman burned like a brand in my pocket, a constant reminder that the darkness I escaped wasn't gone, it was dormant, waiting for the right moment to stir again. I tried to bury the memories beneath work, noise, and normalcy, but the Appalachian Mountains had etched themselves into my soul. One night, restless and unable to sleep, I found myself tracing the carvings on the wood, feeling the rough edges beneath my fingers. Then a whisper, a faint breath of sound caressed my ear. Not the wind, not my imagination. My name, frozen. I spun around in the dark apartment. Nothing, just shadows stretching long in the streetlight's glow. But the air was thick with that same suffocating presence, the same cold that had chased me through the woods. I realized then that the mountain's grip stretched far beyond their physical borders. It had followed me home, tethered by the ritual, by the fear, by whatever ancient power held in place. I wasn't safe. Not really. And somewhere, deep in the dark places between dreams and waking, I knew I would have to return, because the mountains never let go. The nights grew darker, heavier with a creeping dread that gnawed at the edges of my sanity. The whispering grew louder, no longer just a fleeting sound, but persistent presence lingering in every shadow, every quiet corner of my life. Friends noticed my restless eyes, the way I flinched at sudden sounds, but I could tell they didn't understand. How could they? They had never faced something that waited patiently to consume you. I found myself haunted by dreams of the cabin, of the pale figure with the black, wet eyes, always watching, always waiting just beyond the reach of firelight. In these dreams, the mountains stretched endlessly, their trees twisted and clawing at the sky, and the voice whispered promises I didn't want to hear but couldn't ignore. One evening, a letter arrived. No return address. The paper yellowed and brittle, ink faded but still legible. The handwriting was shaky, deliberate. You can't run from what you've seen. The mountains call you back. When the time comes, you will know. Fear tightened like a noose around my throat. I tried to ignore it, to dismiss it as a cruel joke, but the talisman in my pocket burned warmer, as if alive. I reached out to Miriam, but the number she'd given me was disconnected. Friends in the nearby towns whispered that the old woman had vanished, her cabin left empty, swallowed once again by the relentless forest. The mountains had claimed her too, and now it was waiting for me. I packed a bag, only what I could carry, and stepped outside into the cold night. The wind was carrying a whisper. My name carried on a breath of something ancient and terrible. I walked toward the edge of the city, toward the forest's dark embrace, knowing that the Appalachian Mountains were calling me home, because some stories never end, and some shadows never let go. If this story sent a chill down your spine, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more terrifying true tales every week. We explore the darkest corners of real-life horror, from haunted woods to urban legends that are anything but fiction. Thanks for watching, and remember, never follow the voice in the woods. It might not be calling you back. It might be calling you in.